Hello, I'm Claire and this is my channel Clarobobbins. Welcome back if you're a subscriber and welcome if you're dropping by for the first time. This is Friday Sews. Thanks to Jen from Today in Jen's Sewing Room for giving us this hashtag. So what am I wearing today? Well, I'm wearing the Pattern Emporium Wanderlust dress, and it's in a fabric from Pound Fabrics. It's a viscose ponte. It's very comfortable. They do have a couple of viscose pontes that are very similar in at the moment. They don't have this design, but they have some of the same type of fabric. Very easy to sew, a good amount of natural fibre in it, warm, lovely for this time of the year, great to wear. The pattern is very easy to follow. It has back seams, so it's easy to fit. There's an interesting method for showing a full bust adjustment, but I didn't follow that. I quite like the boob bubble version of full bust adjustments that Cashmerette do. So I used a t-shirt pattern that fits me very well as a sloper, a knit sloper, to create the full bust adjustment for this, and it's worked really well. I'm very happy with the fit. The rest of the fit is great. It's a lovely shape. I've got it on in a maxi length, and I will put some stills, or I think, yeah, I haven't got any video of it, but I have got some stills of me wearing it, along with the Metra blazer in a lovely purple ponte from Minerva Fabrics. So I'll pop those up so you can have a look at what it looks like full length. So today I thought I'd do an update of what we've been, the progress we've made with the Beartown fabric dyeing. That's the rust and tea dyeing. We have next Tuesday we have our next session, but I can show you the outcomes of the dyeing. So you'll have seen from my last video where there's an interview with Ruth Axton. You'll have seen from that that video that I put some stills in of the fabric, all wrapped around rusty bits and pieces, horseshoes, nails, screws, bits of old doorknob, all sorts of rubbish, and some really quite nice shapes and so on. A lot with horsey themes. We wrapped the fabric, the silk, around the various bits of rusty metal, so that there was really no more than 2 layers of fabric between each piece of rusty metal. We tied it very tightly with a variety of different threads, and then we placed it in a pan with used tea bags, boiled it up for probably simmered it from between 2 and 4 hours probably. They were then rinsed very thoroughly. They were put through a washing machine, daily wash, with a silk and wool detergent, and then they were just line dried, and I've just given them an iron. I had to wet them down to iron them. They were very crumpled, but the effects are stunning. So let's have a little look. I'm going to show you my favourite one first, because it's this is the last piece I did, and I folded the fabric in half, and it's given almost an animal print effect down the centre, and I just love that ombre effect. It's a long piece, so it would make a nice scarf, and I know that Ruth's quite keen to show how the silk could be used for garments as well as for patchwork and quilting. So it feels lovely. There's a brilliant resist there. I'll just bring it a little bit closer. I'll put some stills in of these as well, if you want to have another look, a closer look, so you can see where I wrapped the string round tightly. It's resisted the dye. And then you can see where the fold of the fabric was. It's just taken the dye slightly differently on that fold. And then towards the inside, there's probably more rust and less tea. I interspersed, I rolled it up in a sausage shape, in half, then into a sausage, and I think I folded the ends in. Can't just remember exactly, but I started with a 6-inch nail that was very rusty, and then after after one layer of rolling, I put another nail in, and then this repeated again, and I ended up then with smaller and smaller bits and pieces going in there. So there were no more than probably maximum of 4 layers of silk between the different pieces of rusty metal. So very pleased with that one. Some of the pieces look rather like nebula photographs that you see when photographs that have been taken through telescopes in space. The colours are very dramatic. I think this one is one of Sandra's, and it's lovely. There's some really strong shapes. She had a rusty piece of kind of circular piece of wire, and then these are the ones that were left. These had at least another day and a half where they were left wet, and some nice resists there, some lovely chocolatey browns and right through to black and some tan colours. And because we're cutting these up, we can be very selective about which pieces. Whoops, I don't really want those on the floor. We can be very selective about which pieces we use to do to make the quilt. Another one here, lovely. Whoops, lovely length. I'm not sure who did this one. Might have been one of mine. Oh no, right. This is thicker thread, so this is one of the other ladies in the group, because I think there were 4 of us. I think I did the dyeing for 4 of us. Kind of crisscross, and you can just see how that's come through on the resist. And again there. And then that's the horseshoe area. Really unusual. Lovely dye effects. So you can use this type of dyeing on any natural fabric. And depending on the fabric, you get different effects, which makes sense, doesn't it? This one's lovely. Again, this one's quite animal-esque, isn't it? Animal printish. And I can't decide whether it's the spotty effect or the colour. Probably a combination of both, I suppose. Lovely. This is definitely one that I did. That's very tie-dye effect, isn't it? I love that one. It's a bit like Christmas when you open them. It's because you really don't know what you're going to get until you open the parcel. Very rich colours. I think this is one of. I think this one is one of Sandra's that got left for the extra period of time, and I think the colours are a bit more intense. So it was left in the dye for the same length of time, but kept wrapped up and damp for longer, a day and a half longer, and that's really. Look at that, amazing. I hope you can see it as well from that side. I can see the light coming through it from behind the camera. I think this is another one of Sandra's that got left longer. I think there were 3 of hers. I love this arc of colour here. Amazing. And the last one. Oh, no, 2. Took me ages to iron these. I had to wet them down because they were really, look at that, that's so dramatic. Now this has to be one that's been left longer. It's very, very dramatic. Wow, I think that's another horseshoe. That's definitely Sandra's. That's the one that reminds me of a nebula. It could just be from a print from a photograph from a space scene, I think. And another one, another lovely, lovely variety on there. Oh, love these. So pleased with them. Now, last year, I can't remember just when, maybe August time, we had a lady come to do Beartown Patchwork and Quilting, to do a talk on natural dyeing, particularly dyeing with plants and leaves. And she uses a very similar way of dyeing. So those involve tea and rust. And the rust acts as a mordant. So the rust sets the dye, the tea colour, into the fabric. And you can use all sorts of metal oxides as mordants. And depending, as I say, on the different textiles you're using, you get different colour effects. And also the types of leaves. And this is one of hers, and I bought this. She had she came to give us a talk on natural dyeing. This is on piece silk. It's very delicate, and it's been beautifully done. And I'm just going to hold it up so you can really see the detail there of the veins on the leaf and the colours. Her website is by Maggie Naturally. I think it's by Maggie, like Naturally. Tales from the Fish Kettle. She has a blog as well. And I will insert her details below the video. These Acer leaves have a pale orange running through them. But the detail is amazing. She runs courses if you're interested. She's in Liverpool, so northwest UK, near Liverpool. She's amazing. I really enjoyed the session we had with her. She came and did a workshop at the Beartown, but I didn't take part in that. I think they worked on, I don't think they used silk, I think they used cotton. But I'd be very interested in going to one of her workshops in the future. I think I was away when they did it. But fabulous work. I loved it, so I bought myself that. It's piece silk as well, and I think with piece silk, they don't kill the silk moths. I think that's right. I have a little card that explains piece silk. So I will let you know how we get on with the update after our session on Tuesday night. So there'll be something in next week's Friday Sews about our group project, which hopefully we'll be putting in an exhibition, certainly this year, and hopefully in not too long time. So we're cutting out on Tuesday, and we'll see where we go from there. So exciting. So that's Beartown Patchwork and Quilters in Congleton, and again I'll put the details below to their website if you're reasonably local and you're interested, or you might just want to have a look at the website and see what we're doing. So I decided on the Cashmerette Vernon. It's the first time I've made that particular pattern, and it's all cut out, and I've started sewing up some of the flat fell seams. I've done a sew-in interfacing, which is based into the collar stand and the cuffs, and I thought I'd just, I've taken some video on how to do a flat fell seam. I'll put that towards the end of the sewing video. If I can chapterize it, I have my new laptop. So the Cashmerette Vernon Shirt. It's a regular Cashmerette pattern. I'm a Cashmerette club member, so I get their club pattern every month. So they also do a huge number of workshops and fitting classes and sew-alongs for all of their garments. And one of the things they did in 2024 was Sloper School. And the Sloper School is open to anyone. There is a charge for the Sloper School, but if you're a club member, you get it free. so it makes the club, particularly makes the all access membership really good value for money. So I had a go at that, and this is my slope, where I'm up to so far. So this is my dress sloper, and it's based on the Wyman pattern. When the sloper school's running, there's a supportive chat set up, and video access for you to send photographs or videos of your sloper and the fittings you've done so far to the sloper school, and they will advise you on the next stages and how to do it. And then there are detailed sew-alongs for fitting for the various parts of the of the sloper. So I grade from a 14 top down to a 12 on the hip, but I'm very straight through the waist. So I can't remember whether I graded out slightly at the waist and then in at the hips. It's almost straight. I'm something like a 36 waist and a 39 hip, something ridiculous like that. So yeah, rectangle with boobs, that's me. So I have more work to do on this, so I'm going to join the sloper school again in 2025 and continue working on this. It's a lot better than it was. I'm getting a reasonable fit, but I think it could be even better, particularly around the bust dart area. I get some wrinkling there, and I haven't got the sway back sorted out. But I thought I'd mention that because it has meaning when you look at the pattern piece for the front that I've done for my Vernon shirt. So I thought I'd just start with that, just to show you a bit of background. When I first came back to sewing, around COVID time, I'd made all my own clothes when I first started work in the mid-80s, and I only ever knew about Vogue patterns, Vogue, Butterick, that type of thing. I was probably a straight size 14. You know, I was in my 20s. I was fairly slim. I'm probably, I would say, 1.5 to 2 stone heavier now than I was then. So, you know, yeah, and it goes in all the wrong places, doesn't it? So I'm much thicker in the waist, and I'm bigger in the bust, and I have a bit of back fat and all those things. But, you know, I'm mid-60s. It happens. So I thought I'd show you. I'd never heard of a full bust adjustment, and I had no idea about standard pattern size, a standard UK pattern size being a B. I just didn't know that. So I didn't know about high bust and full bust. So that was a real, sorry, I hope my microphone's not rustling. So I didn't know about high bust or full bust. So that was a real eye-opener and a bit of a game changer as far as pattern fitting. So this is my front piece for my Vernon shirt. And I've made some adjustments. You'll be able to see lots of brown sticky tape. I use paper tape, gummed paper tape. Yeah, it's great because it means that any pattern piece they're finished with or any offcuts can go straight into the paper recycling without having to take the sellotape off. So it's a recyclable tape, but it does look a bit ugly. I'm sorry about that. So this is the dart here. I slash my darts so that I cut them open at one side. I'll just show you. So that when I'm marking my pattern, I can just open the dart, fold it back, mark the dart on the pattern, and then I just fold it back in and stick it down again. So I really like that. I'd rather do that than fiddle around trying to get the dart drawn on accurately. So this is the front piece. I've moved the apex of the bust down, so I've inserted, and I always write on my pattern what I've done, and I know I've done it. So I've put 3/4 of an inch above the apex to move the apex down, and then I've done a small full bust adjustment of how much is that? That full bust adjustment is, I need to measure it, I haven't written it on. It looks like about 1/2 inch. It's very small. So, and I've done that, those of you that have never done a full bust adjustment, I've done that by cutting up to the point of the dart. So this is my dart here. So up to the point here, and then across to the seam, across to the seam line here, the sewing line. And then you snip in from the edge of the paper, but you leave a little hinge so that you can hinge on your seam allowance line. And then you cut up the centre of the dart, and you do the same thing. You hinge out until this gap here is parallel. It has to be parallel at the amount you desire. And remember, you've got 2 halves to the front. So if you need a whole inch, then it will only be 1/2 inch each side. And then you put a piece of paper behind it and stick it down, and then you would probably trace it off. And if I like this and I use it again, then I'll probably trace off the front, trace off this pattern. But at the moment it's just a PDF stuck together. So I'm quite short in the body. Well, I'm not very tall at all. I'm about 5'4½". I like to think I'm 5'5". I'm probably not quite 5'5". 5'4½" So where I've put the 3/4 of an inch in to reduce the bust apex, I've reduced the length of the body just below the waist. I think, where's my waist mark? Yeah, just below the waist. I've reduced it so the overall length of the pattern remains the same. I adjusted where the notches were so that I didn't need to adjust the back, the length of the back. I haven't done a sway back adjustment on the back piece because it's a less fitted garment than my sloper, so there shouldn't be a problem with sway back. And that's all I've done, so we'll see what it's like. I just thought I'd mention everything's cut out, and I've used sew-in interfacing rather than an iron-on interfacing. I really liked that when I did my husband's shirt, so So thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed my video. If you've liked what you've seen, please like my video, give me a thumbs up. I'd love it if you would subscribe. Do go and have a look at my other videos. There's a link below so you can have a look at them, and tell me what you think. What do you think of the dyeing results? Have you done full bust adjustments or other adjustments? Have you ever made a sloper? What's your favourite shirt pattern? I could go on. I'd love to know what you've been up to and what you've been doing. So do please tell me in the comments below. It's been lovely catching up with you. Have a great Friday, and hopefully I'll see you next week. Bye-bye. The right side of the seam shows 2 lines, which can be done in contrast stitching because it's decorative, or can be decorative. On the inside you get a regular seam, which with matching thread doesn't really show at all, and then you get 1 line of stitching. It's a very neat finish on the inside. All of the raw edges are encapsulated in the seam, just like a French seam. So there's no need to finish raw edges before you sew that seam. To do a flat fell seam, you can just do it by hand and using pressing. There's quite a lot of pressing involved in the seam anyway. However, you can use a felling foot, and there are 2 examples here. This one is for a heavier weight fabric. It has a deep slot underneath, and then rather like a French or rolled seam foot, it has a little anvil here that helps to turn the fabric. This one is a much shallower channel underneath. That's the one we're going to use today because it's better for finer fabrics, but you can still sew quite a wide seam with that narrow felling foot. It just behaves much more easily with the fine fabric. So today I'm going to use this foot. You can buy a felling foot, a universal felling foot, snap-on type. It costs about £5. Faff are a little bit more expensive, they're about £11. You can buy a folding attachment for about £5 that goes onto a snap-on foot. Bernina ones have the long shank, they're a little bit more expensive, and they do two different ones for Bernina machines. So our fabric. I'm just taking 2 pieces of ordinary cotton lawn, and I'm just going to pin those, and I'm going to sew a 1/2 inch seam because that's what my shirt wants me to use. I'm going to do doing the Cashmerette Vernon Shirt, so this is a practice for that. So flat felling is really easy on straight seams. It's not quite so easy on curved seams because the seam it's not a very flexible seam because of the width of it. So you're really better with a French seam on a curved seam rather than a flat fell seam. But it's great for straight seams, hence its use, or with slight curves, hence its use for shirts. So I'm doing a 1/2 inch seam, and those of you who are into your quilting will recognise this little piece of fabric as being a donkey. So donkey is called a donkey because it does all the work. So there's our donkey, and so any knots in from the sewing machine get left in there. So a 1/2, it's only demonstration one, so I'm not going to do a lock stitch to start with. I'm just sewing my seam. I'm using a red thread so you can see it more clearly. So there's our regular seam, 1/2 inch seam. What we now need to do is to press open the seam allowances, and then we're going to trim back 1 seam allowance to 1/4 of an inch, and I'm going to do that using my quilting ruler. So I'll just press that over at the ironing board, and then we'll go over to the cutting table. Which you can do either like I'm doing with my rotary cutter, or you can do it with scissors if that's easier for you. There we go. Oh. So I'm going to press this seam allowance now with the fabric over the seam so that the felling foot, so this part of the seam allowance will go over the felling foot. And okay, so I've folded under the seam allowance there, and I'm just going to do a couple of stitches with the felling foot just to get it going, and then I'm going to pop the folded seam allowance over the felling foot. There we go. That's it. And then we just need to keep the stitched line we've already sewn straight with our felling foot, and away we go. It should just turn under as we go. We can always give it a little bit of encouragement if we need to. A few stray, I didn't do a very good job of cutting this edge. Maybe I used the edge I hadn't cut. There we go. If you're using a shifty fabric, one that has less structure, then starch is your friend. So for my twill, my 10-cell twill, I shall be starching. Oh, I'm going to just turn that under. I shall be starching my seams before I sew them, so that it won't be too slippery and shifty. There we go. Just turn that under. Thicker fabrics tend to stay put a little bit better with this than the thin fabrics. Well, that should be fine now. You will get the idea anyway. Whatever fabric you're using, it is a technique that it's a technique that does require some patience, and you do get better at it as you practice it. So just take your time, let the foot do as much work as it can, just encourage the fabric in there, and away we go. So as I say, you can do this with, you can just do a French seam and then stitch it flat and top stitch it. That gives you a very similar effect to a flat fell seam. And you can just sew it freehand and it does work. It's just a bit more fiddly when you don't have a felling foot. But you can see, even before I've pressed that, apart from that little hiccup where I was, where I've got some loose threads, it's not bad. So with a little bit of practice and a bit more care with your preparation of your fabrics, this side is absolutely fine, and this side is fine as well, and that will press up nicely. But here I've just got a little bit of my raw edge sticking up. So obviously if you're wanting to do a decorative stitch, it does show, so you need to just practice and be confident and make sure your edges are nice and clean before you start sewing. I might re-record this bit.